Hey, Future Lawyer. Welcome to the LSAT Simplified podcast presented by Hey Future Lawyer, where we talk about all things LSAT, law school admissions, and otherwise. If you want to check out our free LSAT course, go to heyfuturelawyer.com to sign up for a free account today. Hey, folks. Welcome to the podcast for this week. This week, we have a bunch of random LSAT things to talk about, which we'll be going through, and it should be a party. So the first one that I have is an update from someone who had previously taken LSAT class, and this person is asking what they should be doing going forward with their school offers. So they write, "Hey Ben, I just want to give you an update. I took your LSAT class back in May of 2024 and got a 158. Not the best, but it was a 9-point jump in 1 month. So yeah, obviously from a 149 to a 158 in a month was awesome. I would have loved for this person to keep going, but we'll get into the additional context on them that kind of changes their situation. They say, anyway, I ended up applying to LSU, Tulane, and Texas A&M. I just got all the decisions back. And for reference, I was applying with a 3.9 GPA. So this person has a 158, 3.9. I don't know those schools' individual numbers, but it should be pretty good. Obviously, without looking at this person's personal statement and supplementals, it's a little hard to know exactly what's going to happen. But you do have a pretty good idea, 158, 3.9, they'll get pretty decent offers. And just to pull up like LSU's 509 report so that we can look at the actual data, LSU's admissions medians are a 156, so she's above that, and a 3.7. So well above, should get in. She did say she got admitted and got a $15,000 per year scholarship to LSU, which is okay. The cost of attendance is $20K a year because she is a resident. So that's solid. It does look like they raise tuition then. Oh, that's the living cost. That's basically a full ride because the cost of attendance to go to LSU is almost entirely the living off campus because the actual tuition is only $24,000, which is really low for Louisiana State. So, okay, sure. Basically a full ride, not quite, but roughly. At Tulane, which is another school in Louisiana, she was admitted and got a $30,000 per year scholarship. Tulane has pretty good employment, but it's going to be a cost of attendance of roughly $66,000 per year for this person, which is fairly aggressive for a school that, while it has okay employment, like in that it overperforms, I wouldn't be excited about going to Tulane and going into debt. But we'll look at the employment for these two schools to compare. And then she was waitlisted at Texas A&M. To my understanding, that's not terribly surprising because I don't have Texas A&M's numbers in front of me. But if I pull Texas A&M 509 report, and I'm pulling this up in the tab next to me, their median is a 168 LSAT and a 3.97. So she's below both LSAT and GPA at Texas A&M. So to get waitlisted, pretty expected. So her two real options are LSU or Tulane. I am immediately inclined to go to LSU because it's 1/3 the cost per year. She'll graduate with $60K that she'll have paid for law school and living. Whereas if she goes to Tulane, it's $66K times 3, which is 198. So basically 200,000 plus the interest. And obviously the LSU will also accrue interest, but interest on 60K as opposed to interest on 200K is a lot less substantial. And while Tulane does have better employment, I'd be really scared to take out 200K out of Tulane. It's not Harvard, it's not Yale, it's Tulane, which is a fine school, but it doesn't have the prestige to where the 200K is really worth it, at least in my book. But let's see what else she says. She says, I have state VA benefits, which I think she either has a family member in the military or she herself served. I don't know. Either way, though, she has benefits that she can use. So let's see. So she says, I will automatically be tuition exempt at LSU because it is a public university. I could also try to get Tulane to honor them, but they don't have to because they don't fall into this category. So the more we read, the more clear it is, just go to LSU. And then she says they don't apply at Texas A&M because they're state specific and Texas is outside of Louisiana, obviously. So she said, what is your objective opinion about my best option? I feel like I've hit it, but we'll look into the employment for these two schools. LSU will grant me the most financial security. I agree. However, Tulane may grant me more opportunities and they have better out-of-state placement after graduation. Well, we're going to look at that to see if it's worth it. She then says, I also want to go into sports and entertainment and they have a robust program in that field. Yeah, but like, let's think about it. Are NFL players picking their sports agent based on who went to a school with a sports clinic? Or are they picking the lawyers at kick-ass firms? Like realistically, just because a school has a sports clinic does not mean that that's where people get hired from. In fact, I'd argue it's more marketing by the schools than actual opportunity from them. She continued, I was attending their sports and entertainment law conference in March. Yeah, it's marketing. It doesn't actually get you jobs. Also, is it better to avoid getting your JD from the same place as your bachelor's? Because I went to LSU for undergrad. I'd argue it's actually good to go double up Because a lot of the value you get from going to these regional schools, because let's be real, LSU, Tulane, not bad law schools, but these are not national brands. When you go to like California or New York and you talk about Tulane, they're like, where is that? Or if you talk about LSU, I mean, people know where that is because of football and like Louisiana is in the name. But these are not schools where it's like, oh, I know a lot about LSU law school. It's not a lot of a brand. So it's really that network you have within the state. And having gone to a school twice kind of doubles up on that network. Because if someone likes you because you went to LSU for law school, that gets doubled up if you went there for undergrad as well. So I would be inclined to go to LSU, which I told her. But just to really hit this super hard, let's look at the employment data for each of these schools. So first, let's look up the LSU ABA employment data. And in this, we can see how they do. So these are ABA required disclosures. Every law school has to put them out. I have it pulled up for people watching on video. If you're on audio, I'll just describe. But basically what you have is a matrix which shows all the jobs that people get. Now, what you'll see is that the lower rank the school, the less good the jobs tend to be. And the higher rank the school, the better the jobs tend to be, which, of course. Now, where it's tricky is there are some exceptions. So it's always worth looking. Because LSU, I'd say above average law school in terms of entry metrics, but not an elite school by any stretch of the imagination. And they have 178 grads, which I'm highlighting for people looking. That's the number we care about. Everything else up here kind of doesn't matter. We just want that big number, which is 178 people graduating. We then want to go to the employment type. Because while this is not a perfect substitute for the kind of jobs people get, it's pretty good. Because there's a few that get high salaries, and those are the big firms, out of which I like to count 250 plus, because we're thinking big national law firms, multiple offices, partners making a ton of money. These are not the only high paying jobs, but they are the majority. And there are 17 at LSU, which is roughly 10% of their 178 grads. That being said, that is not where the prestigious jobs end. There are also federal clerkships. And if you do a federal clerkship, the odds of you then being able to exit into one of these high paid positions is very high. Because federal clerkships, it's very prestigious. And as such, these 4 kiddos at LSU that got federal clerkships are very likely to be able to exit into these positions. So that gets us to a total of 21. So we have 21 out of 178 at LSU, which I will note to the side. So we have that written down. I'm also not a math guy, but that's slightly over 10%. Like that's like what, maybe 12 or 13%. So 21 out of 178. Not great odds. Like you're not wrong. LSU, if you want to go to big law and make lots of money, it's not a very good bet. It's probably not going to work out. But we don't have anything to compare it to. So let's see what Tulane gives us. So Tulane ABA employment report. Now Tulane has theirs, and I'm showing you guys how to find this if you're watching the internet. They have 212 grads. And let's see how many they have. Okay, so big jump. They have 59 going to big law, and then another 12 going to federal clerkship. So that is 71 out of, what is that? Tulane, 71 out of 212, which is about 1/3. So you got to be in the top 33-ish, let's say 35% of your class at Tulane, which is not terribly easy because that means you still have to beat almost everyone. And then at LSU, you have to be like in the top 15%, we'll call it. We'll round up. Either way, though, neither of those are good options. So realistically, if you go to Tulane, yeah, you have almost 3x. Well, not almost 3x. You have a higher chance of getting these jobs. That is true. But it is still a gamble. If you go to Tulane, you still have to be in the top 35%. Because let's be real, the other people that don't get these jobs, whether you're going to a little firm of 26 or public interest and being a DA or public defender, they're all paying not great, realistically. These are paying often under, well, almost always under 6 figures. Almost no one's making over 6 figures, although with inflation, that'll probably change. Either way, these are people often starting at like 65K, which I know is like terribly scary, but that's why it's very important to kind of set yourself up well if you're going to law school for the money. If you're not going for the money, it's more so about pick LSU. So this is a tricky situation. I mean, if you wanted to go to big law, which it does seem like the jobs you want to do are at least tangentially related to big law, I don't love any of these options, honestly, because the options are gamble at Tulane for $200,000 plus interest for a 35% chance. And realistically, like, let's be real, you're going to Tulane as not an academic killer. Like, you did decent on the LSAT, 159 or 158, I don't remember. It indicates you're doing okay, but it's not like, holy shit, like this person's going to crush it. Your 3.9 is pretty nice, but also GPAs are kind of hard to interpret because, like, I don't know what that was in. I don't know how hard your course load was. Because let's be real, some undergrad programs, pretty easy. I had a really easy undergrad program. Others are really hard. So that 3.9 does not indicate a lot. The kind of standardized measurement we have here is your GPA, or sorry, your LSAT, which is a 158. So like solid LSAT, I don't have concerns about you in terms of like competing in law school. Oh, so I should rephrase. I don't have concerns about you like flunking out of law school. You're going to be fine. You're going to be able to do the work. What I do have concerns about is, are you going to get A's? are you going to crush it and beat everyone else there? Because law school is graded on a curve and it's very high pressure. It is way higher pressure than the LSAT. The LSAT you can take whenever you're ready. There's no pressure. You just take it once you're ready. And you can retake it. If it doesn't go well, you're good. Take it again. You can take all these practice exams. You can review. On your law school grades, you get one test and that's game over. And after your first semester, your future has often been determined. Because here is an unfortunate story that I'm about to tell. As someone who's seen a lot of people go to law school, I've seen people go to law school to do big law, and I've seen them not get it, which is, I don't even know the word to say. It is like life ruining. Well, I don't want to say that. That's hyper. It is so crushing because they go to law school with this vision of I'm going to Tulane. They have a 33% chance. But I had someone who's a smart person. She had a 170, 3.7 or something. So, or yeah, something like that. And she went to a school where about 40% of the school goes to big law. But she was only in the top 60%, which means she didn't get any interviews. So even though she went and she got decent grades, she got like B's, like maybe a C here, not like a little below average. She did not do the best, but she didn't do terrible. Like it's not like she failed out. And she is X'd out of big law. Big law is no longer an opportunity. And the school she went to is a school she went to because she wanted their big law placement. Because the only real guarantees are like the very top of the mountain, the Harvards, the Yales, the Stanfords. Those are guarantees. Everything else is just better odds. And what worries me about Tulane is that this is a 1/3 chance, and it's a big bet. It's a $200,000 bet you're placing if you go here, and it might not pay off. You might end up making $70,000 upon graduation, which really scares me. So my usual, I guess, decision is probably don't go into debt. Like I would take LSU. Like, yes, is it harder out of LSU? It is. But realistically, I would be very scared about going to Tulane. I just don't think this is going to work out the same way. And for what it's worth, that person that I just said did not get big law, she is there on a full ride. So even though she's, I'd say, bummed about her opportunities, she is not under the stress of, she didn't go into a bunch of debt. She's, still working a little bit while in law school. She's not going into debt. Obviously, you have living expenses, so there's debt there. Because even if you don't pay tuition, you still have to pay for your rent, your books, your car, all that stuff. But she's not going to be in crazy debt. She's going to be like in 50K of debt, just like this person at LSU, which, well, it sucks. You can get out of. Like, that's not impossible. And there are jobs and you can work your way up. Like say you don't get big law, that doesn't mean you make no money forever. What it means is that you're never going to make 500K a year ever if you don't get big law. Like, and that when I say never, I know it's like, okay, Ben, like there are some people like, yes, 1 in 10,000, but most people, if you're not going to big law, the route to the big money in law school just isn't really there. So once again, it's like, there's no judgment here on what you guys want or don't want, but rather that you have to actually consider these things because this is reality. And I sometimes see it on social media and it's what frustrates me. It's why I think I'm like viewed as like the LSAT meanie is because no one talks about this. And when I see someone going to law school with a 3.2 145 because they have expectations that lawyers are very highly paid, I'm very worried because I'm worried about that person striking out in terms of employment, going into crazy debt because some of these people very, not their fault. They're just excited to go to graduate school because they don't understand what law school actually is. And so everyone in their circle is excited for them, rightfully so, because you're like, oh, you're going to be a lawyer. That's awesome. But in reality, that person's financially screwing themselves over because they're not actually getting a useful degree. Like JD out of LSU with like a 3.0 is not worth much. It's worth like, it's an average white collar degree. You're going to make like 70K, which is fine, but that's not what people picture. So as long as you go in eyes wide open about expectations, that's fine. But this is an analysis that we all should be doing before picking a school. And when in doubt, take the money because there are schools that'll give you money. And yeah, anyways, it's a lot on that person. But basically, I think case studies are very worthwhile. Because also the other thing that worries me, and this doesn't mean to be harsh, because like fundamentally, I'm not a lawyer. I don't know what I'm talking about. What I do know is that from talking to lawyers, when they hear that you're planning on doing like sports law, they laugh. They're like, what are you talking about? That's not a thing. Or entertainment law. They're like, oh, you think you're going to represent Kim Kardashian? Like you're fucking delusional. So I would just be very careful that you're not going in delusional because I was talking to someone today and they're like, I want to do either international law or corporate law. I was like, first off, international law is not even real. No one practice. And like, once again, when I say never, I'm being very broad here. There are people that practice quote unquote international law at like the UN, but not really. Most international law is like regulations between countries, like making sure that Google can operate in the EU and follow the EU regulation, or that like the tariffs are being followed by whatever company you're working for. Stuff like that. It's not like arguing in front of the UN for like some human rights abuses. Like, do those exist? Sure. But there are a few of those people. Also, it's like functionally nobody if you actually round out the numbers. No one listens to international law, not to go back to like realism from poli-sci, but if there's nothing to enforce a law, the law basically doesn't exist. So it's one of these things where like, there's nothing wrong with having these misperceptions. Because like, let's be real, I didn't know what law school was before doing all this research and becoming an LSAT law school dork that just like does this all in all. But something I see that's very frustrating is people that like kind of blow smoke and they're not willing to say the truth here. And the thing is, the truth is not like you guys want the truth. Like you guys don't want to be sold a bill of goods because if you actually want to make the money, you want to know how to get there. And if you had a misimpression of what the money is, that's good to know so that you can decide, is this still worth it? If I was going to make 150 as a government employee, which is not, I mean, is a thing. I shouldn't say it's literally not a thing. It is not as easy as it's like, oh, that's just a guarantee. It's pretty fucking hard. I feel like it's better to hear that from me than to hear it when you have all this debt and you can't find a job. I don't know. Maybe that's just, maybe I'm the meanie, but I just don't think so. And yeah, so there is another question, which is that your undergrad provided a stipend of 3K when you went because of my parents' income. Is law school similar? No, law school is all merit-based. They do not give need-based. Well, once again, caveat, there are a few exceptions. Harvard, Yale, and Stanford give need-based aid. So if you have like a 175 and a 4.0 and you get into Harvard, Yale, Stanford, they'll give you need-based aid. The rest of the undergrad or the rest of the law schools don't care. They are not giving it to you based on how much you need it. They're giving it to you based on what LSAT score do you come with, which is actually a very broken system because what ends up happening is that kids with higher GPAs and higher LSAT scores, which let's be real, tend to correlate with richer people because richer people have better access to early education. They have better access to, test prep. I actually don't think the LSAT requires a ton of money to do well at it. It certainly helps, but like, I think that you can, if you can't do the LSAT for under 1,000, I think it's, well, and once again, I should be careful here because it's not that you can't spend that much. It's that often, I mean, some of the resources suck is really what it comes down to. And so you can end up spending 2K on some like Kaplan course and it blows. So like sue me Kaplan. We'll go to court over that one. I feel like I can defend that. You guys hire 165s untimed on practice tests. So like, if you guys want to sue me, let's have fun with that. Also, no one listens to the podcast, at least not to the point where they would actually care of like defamation, whatever. Anyways, so yeah, it's tricky though, because the people that get the highest LSAT scores tend to be the more wealthy and connected people. So it really does become kind of a take from the poor and give to the rich situation with law. It's like a reverse Robin Hood where the law schools, because they're focused on numbers, are admitting people all over the spectrum. But then what they do is instead of charging everyone a reasonable price of like 45K, they charge the people that are unqualified and less likely to get the good jobs double. They charge them like 70K. And then they charge the people coming in with really good grades and really good LSAT scores, as in the people that are likely to crush it in law school, they charge them zero. It's such a broken like reverse Robin Hood system. And it's why I think it's why people think I'm a negative Nancy, because I'll tell people like, don't take that offer. That's the worst thing that'll ever happen to you. But I just don't want people to be the reverse Robin Hood. I don't want them to be the sucker paying for the other kid's tuition who's going to outcompete them for a job. I don't think you're helping that person by telling them to go to law school. I think you're fucking them over. But this is also like my therapy. I like vent to the podcast about it because people call me mean. They're like, Ben says don't go to this law school. What a hater. What a negative like bully or toxic. It's like, no, that's not where it comes from. Where it comes from is like, this is a misunderstanding of the legal profession. And you're not helping anyone by confirming their delusions of, and it's not even confirming them. It's pretending their delusions are real. Pretending law school is a safe to the upper class is, I think it's so unethical. It's why, like, if you ever see me like kind of unhinged on Instagram, that's like where it comes from. Is like I'll see something like today, someone posted, and this is who I consider a very toxic, positively person. They post about how a 3.2 is not a bad undergrad GPA, and it's like I'm not here to like throw shade at anyone. Like if you have 3.2, it is what it is. It's the past. That is what it is. It is objectively a bad GPA when it comes to admissions. That is going to hold you back, and like that doesn't mean that a 3.2 is like less than or worthless. But he was like, oh, it's about average, maybe like a little bit above average. I'm like, in what world it's a 3.2? Are we looking at the same law school data? Because if we pull up the LSU one, like LSU is a pretty average law school. It's a 3.7 is their median, a 3.92 is their 75th. Like these are not like a 3.7 is pretty, I would consider that like an average law school admissions GPA. Now, where this could be useful, or you could say a 3.2 is not the end. If you have a 3.2, crush the LSAT, and by crush it, like get like a 160. You don't need to like ace it. You just need to demonstrate that you can do it. If you do that, you're fine. And so, but realistically, here's the thing. People don't like the negativity. People don't like hearing about employment. They don't like hearing that their GPA is not good. So this is a very frustrating, perverse incentive thing where people that are a little bit more positive actually get more traction with the market. And for what it's worth, I think the more cynical people, or not more cynical, the more, I don't want to say you guys are smarter than like some of the like my quote unquote competitors, but I think you guys are than the people that work with them, because you guys hopefully realize that like this comes from a place of love as opposed to like a place of meanness. And anyways, it's just, it pisses me off because I'm like, you're not helping people. You're fucking people over when you tell them the 3.2 is good, because it's not good. And that's not like, I don't know. People need to disconnect themselves from their numbers. Like a 3.2 does not mean you're a bad person. It does not mean you're worthless, but it is going to hold you back. I had a 3.6 in admission. And it's like, well, I had a 3.6 undergrad for those of you that don't know, like about on the dot. And that would have held me back in admissions. Like realistically, 3.6 is below average. But like the real world, it does not give you any points for pretending a 3.6 is good. It's not good. And that's fine. Like if I'm applying to Harvard or Yale, I would have to make it up with my LSAT. And realistically, it's going to be really hard to get in because a 3.6 demonstrates that I wasn't totally a type A super crusher in college. I did well. I actually got a 4.0 my last 3 years of undergrad. I just didn't do well my first year. But the thing is, they don't get to like caveat that when they're reporting me to the American Bar Association when they're doing their ranking. And if taking me at Harvard, which like this is all hypothetical, I'm not saying I would have gotten into Harvard, but if I applied to Harvard, Harvard has to say, okay, Ben has a good LSAT, he's above median, but his GPA hurts. So if we take him, we need to compensate with another GPA person, someone who has a higher GPA to like balance that out. And realistically, unless they're excited about me, they're just not going to do that. They're going to be like Ben, we like you, but you are going to hurt our ranking. And that will lead to Harvard losing prestige, which means we get fewer applicants, we can charge lower prices, and we don't make as much money. So for them to take me would hurt a school like Harvard or Yale. And it's like, that's reality. But also, I don't know. It just annoys me because I see people like taking advantage of the market, not understanding. And it pisses me off because I'm like, we can make money and like be profitable companies without like lying to our customers. It just really tilts me. And yeah, so another question. So it's similar to what you want to do. You want to be a government lawyer for DHS or think tanks. It's not super high paying, but a very competitive field. And it's like, yeah, like those are real positions. And the thing is, you do work your way up. Like you start lower, probably high 5 figures, and you can work your way up to like well into the ones, inflation adjusted. But also like telling people like you're going to make 200K right out of law school is just not true. Like you're not. You'll start well. The benefits are probably pretty good. You will progress in terms of salary. Often cost of living is a thing. So if you're in DC, I don't know where DHS is oriented, but I imagine it's in like Virginia or DC. They often give you a little bit of compensation given that it's a higher cost of living area. And so like it's not all like terrible. Like being a lawyer is not terrible if it's the work you want to do and you understand what goes into it. But it's like this delusion of like you're going to be the lawyer for Kim Kardashian. It's like, no, you're fucking not. That's not a thing. And telling people they're going to and they're going to make $500,000 a year is just setting people up for failure. So yeah. Oh, that was a fun one. That was a half an hour on that one person. So let's go through some others. I have some other LSAT topics. This first one is from one who's currently in class. I'll obviously omit who it is because no, it's more so the person and their situation. It's their situation I want to talk about, not the person. Because they reached out and said, hey, Ben, I hope all is well with you. This was someone who was thinking about getting accommodations on the LSAT, but they are someone who is involved with the military and they're worried that a diagnosis on the LSAT for like accommodations like anxiety or ADHD will get added to their military record and then make them ineligible for further military positions, which that is a side note to accommodations that I don't have experience with. And it is I think, fair concern. For most people, there's no downside to accommodations. For this person, having that like asterisk on your military health record could be a problem. So this person decided not to get accommodations for that reason. But then they said, that being said, finishing each section under 35 minutes with accuracy is proven to be difficult for me. I scored a 150 on prep test 135 and a 152 on 136. Do you have any tips or advice regarding timing? Obviously, if I had more time, I think I could do better, especially on RC. And he says that I plan on taking the April test, so I'm going to keep grinding to get my score up. So step one is it's good. Like the scores don't necessarily improve linearly. That being said, to go from a 150 to 152, that's pretty fast improvement. Some of our listeners aren't in class. In fact, most of them are not in class. So they don't know the pace. We tend to do roughly 2 tests a week. So at that rate, you're going up 4 points a week, which is pretty incredible LSAT improvement. Obviously, a 152 does not feel sexy when that comes back, but it is a step in the right direction. That being said, scores can fluctuate. That 152 might be a good day, and as such, it might not be indicative of true progress, but it very likely is. And you probably are getting better. Like you can't really backslide. That being said, I did ask this person a follow-up question because I didn't have a ton of advice for them, but I did want to know more. And I asked, like, how much have you been doing? Like when you're doing a section, how far are you getting? And they say that they've been completing every section and their scores have varied from -10 to -12 on logical reasoning. And on reading comprehension, it is -13 to -15. And this is actually their problem. Because if you're missing 10 to 12 questions, that means you're going too fast. Like they are doing 12 questions, attempting them and still getting them wrong. And it's okay to get questions wrong, but it indicates that this person is doing more questions than they're really ready for. Because if you're dropping half the questions you're doing, it means you're not solving them. It means you are kind of getting 30, 40% deep. And because you're not dumb and you can kind of figure out some of the patterns, you're fluking yourself into a decent amount of correct answers. But I would wager that you're probably not really solving any of the questions in terms of like, I am working on this system of questions until I know that that is the answer. Like gun in my head, I feel so good about answering this. So I know this is a very common issue because I actually had more than one email this weekend from basically the same situation of someone saying, I'm in the 150s or like high 140s. I'm finishing. How do I get better? And both people were finishing the sections. In fact, let me see if I can pull this up for video, people. I don't, okay, yeah, I can pull this up without it saying who it is. So this is someone's score report. And if you're on video, you can see it. And what you'll see is that they're doing the whole section, but they're missing all of these questions they're attempting. What this means is that on these questions you're working on, you are putting in effort, you are thinking through them, and then you're not even getting credit for the work you're doing. You're basically not getting paid for the work you're attempting because the LSAT is all or nothing. There are no participation points. You either get the point or you do not. And this person has some good signs. If we look at their second LR section, and I know on audio you guys can't hear this, but they got 9 out of the first 9. That's awesome. They are capable of solving. But then they completely melt down and then get the next 4 wrong from 10 through 13. And it's like they had this relatively high standard, but they need to hold it deeper. And so that's the fix. It's like this person is doing 25 questions. The way they need to fix this is to do 15 and solve 15, or to do 12 and solve 12. You are not LSAT robots, but you need to hold yourself to a high standard of like, I don't miss questions, at least without being really pissed off about it. Because you're not perfect, you're going to miss some. Yet you can't be okay with missing them. Every time you miss one, it has to be like, what did I miss? Like I made a mistake. And what I worry about with someone whose score result looks like this, where it's like kind of all over, is that they're just kind of scratching the surface. And as such, on the easy ones, they're able to see the patterns and it kind of jumps out to them. But then because they're not holding themselves to a high standard, they're getting to these, they kind of get it, and then they just pick an answer. But that's not good enough on the LSAT. You have to solve them. And what's funny is that it often starts feeling easier when you just slow down and start solving, because you're like, oh, the information is there. If you can do it on question 1, you can do it on question 10. It's not different. Like it is harder, but it's not different. And then over time, as you get like, 10 out of 10, then you aim for 11 out of 11. And like, yes, you're going to miss one here and there. Like you're not perfect. But this, which you guys are looking at, is just brutal. And then in RC, like out of the first passage, I don't know how many questions this was, but out of the first 7, they got 4 right. Out of the first 5, they got 3 right. So like they're missing at least 3 questions in that first passage. What that indicates is that you just got to go slower. Because like, let's look at this last passage they did. Did they get any questions right in the last passage? They got like 1 out of 7. Like do the first passage better. Use your time to try to get these points. And then over time, as you get better at the LSAT, you make it further. I get where this comes from and that it's not fun to not finish a section. It feels shitty to like be sitting there and not get through it. But I promise you that the way you get to like crushing the LSAT and getting every question right is to focus on getting questions correct. And then over time, you go fast, not because you're trying to go fast, but because it's subconscious. The questions are so easy because you understand what you're looking for. And let's be real, they don't have to be so easy. Like when I do them, they are really easy. You do not have to get to that point to do very well in the LSAT. I was like kind of mid when I took the LSAT in terms of how good I was at the test. And I still scored in the 99th percentile. Because I would often take 2 or 3 minutes on a question and I'd be like, I do not understand it. And that was with normal time. Many of you have accommodations. All of you have access to accommodations if you want them. So like if you get to solving questions in like 3 to 4 minutes, you are going to get basically every question right. And then let's be real, some questions you solve faster, which allows you to bank up time for the questions that require a little bit more thinking. For me, that was must be trues and parallels. When I took the LSAT, I spent more time on those to like really think them through. I'm better at them now, but I was always really fast at strengtheners, weakeners, flaws. It was easy to me. For those ones though, must be trues, parallels, etc., having a little bit more time helped me. And you kind of bank up that time on the questions that are quote unquote like harder for you. But what I worry is this person's trying to pace themselves. Instead of trying to get the next question right, they're like, I'm trying to get questions right and stay up to time. So like I see the clock going on, it's like, oh, I'm not going too slow. I better pick an answer and move on. And that just kills you. You can't improve that. It's so hard to fix. So I know it's uncomfortable, but please slow down. I know I say it all the time, but it's not, I'm not just saying it. Like I really mean it. It's how you get faster. And you take that step backwards, but then you launch forward once you truly get there. Okay, cool. That is always a fun one. Well, this is a fun fact about me, for those of you that don't know. I'm on the email list of all the other LSAT prep options just to see what they send out, because I think it's funny. And one person sent out the do's and don'ts of LSAT prep, which I just have to go through because, it's good content. Some of it's good, some of it's bad. And yeah, let's see what they say. So do's and don'ts, they have 4 do's and 3 don'ts. So let's do the scoreboard. As of now, they are 0 for 7. So let's see how many good tips they have, bad tips, and we'll say like ties if they're in the middle. And we have 7 total. So let's see what we got. Tip 1. Do take your time to learn each question type, how to identify each one, and how to solve it for logical reasoning. Bad tip. Bad tip. Don't do that. So here's the thing. That's not going to make you worse at the test, but it is a giant waste of time. And what it does is it tricks you into thinking you're getting better when you're not. Because I have way too many people that come to me, like I know all the question types and then they score 145. I'm like, okay, so you know the question types, but they're not helping you because you still get all the questions wrong. So the thing is, like, does this hurt you? No. But what it does do is it causes people to waste their time on things that fundamentally don't matter, which is all this tangential knowledge. And that's not useful. What's useful is sit down, do questions, figure them out. And like knowing, oh, that's a necessary assumption question. That's not literally useless, but it's about as close to useless as you could get. And the worst part, because let's be real, is that going to hurt you? Like, no, it's not. But what it does do is it often prevents people from then doing the work that matters of doing questions and doing sections because they get convinced that you have to learn the LSAT fundamentals before you ever get to doing actual questions. And that is what kills people because they will waste time learning all this like LSAT knowledge that fundamentally does not matter. Like, I know this sounds ridiculous when I say it to people, but I did not know question types when I took the LSAT. It just isn't something I thought about. It's not something I studied. I did questions, I figured them out, and I had so many perfect LR sections. In fact, I think I had like 5 or 6 going into test day. I don't think I had a perfect section on test day on LR, although I fundamentally don't know where I missed the few points I missed. I think I missed like 4 questions on test day out of 75 based on the math I have. Either way, the point is that they probably were LR if I had to guess, because I probably missed like a parallel question or something. But the point is that it distracts people from doing the work that matters, and that is almost as bad. It's like your house is about to be foreclosed on. You like the bank is knocking, they're coming, they're about to take your home because you haven't made the mortgage payments. And you decide that you're going to do spring cleaning. Spring cleaning is a productive thing to do. It is nice to clean your room and to clean your living room and like dust everything. Also, the bank is coming. Like they're coming to take your fucking house. And if you don't actually learn to understand, like to get the questions right, as opposed to learning this kind of tangential knowledge, it's a giant waste of time. So what I find is that this leads people to procrastinate and they feel like they're being productive, but they're really doing something that doesn't matter. And let's be real, reading books, watching videos is more comfortable than actually sitting down and struggling through LSAT questions. Because you fit, like, what is the necessary thing that always happens when you do an LSAT question? Like if you do a section, unless you have reached basically mastery, you're going to miss them and you're going to fail. But that's the point because you learn from the failures. So anyways, okay, so 0 for 1. So far, not good. Tip 2. Remember that this test will take some time to master, so do not rush the process and be patient with yourself. Yeah, that's a good tip. You should take the time. You don't know how long it's going to take you. I tend to say that it takes 3 to 6 months on average. That's a big caveat. That's a giant average. And there are people all over that spectrum. Maybe it's more, I should amend it because I did make that estimation back in the day when there was logic games. I don't know. That 3 to 6 months is not scientific. I should actually get better data for what I say. That's what I've always said. But like, if you're on either side of that, you're like, I'm faster, I'm slower. That's valid. I generally don't have good data for that. But let's see. Do make sure you follow a structured study plan so you don't get off course with your studying. We'll call that a tie because I don't think you need it. Like, I think if you sit down and do LSAT questions, you're going to get better. I did not have a structured LSAT study plan when I studied. I just sat down and did questions every day. I did sit down every day. It was on my calendar. I'm a pretty neurotic person where if I don't do certain things, I'm very routine oriented. Like I exercise literally every day. If I don't, I feel terrible. I might have some like low level anxiety or something, or high level, like let's be real, probably high level anxiety. I probably do have like some mental health issues. Who doesn't? But I feel really bad. And I made the LSAT that way where I felt like consuming guilt if I didn't do my work. I actually feel the same way about like if I miss an Instagram post. I haven't missed an Instagram upload in 4 years straight. I've not missed a day. There's a few days where I've taken one down, but it's always been a personal choice of like, oh, I actually don't want that going up today. I want to edit it. But I've always had one scheduled every single day. And I have them scheduled out like a month in advance. And I have the next month's made a month before then. Like I'm so far ahead of most of these things. And so like maybe that's a personal thing that I need to rectify. But I don't think you need one. I think what you do need to do is be consistent. If a schedule helps you be consistent, that's great. But like, I don't think you need to know today you do prep test 132. It doesn't matter. Like we have our homework schedule in class that I sent out an email for, but like, let's be real. There's no magic to 137, which we're working from today. It's just a test. If you decided to like go AWOL and do prep test 155, like that's also chill. Like they all have stuff to learn from. It's more so just about doing something. So I'll call it a tie. I think it is useful in that it can help some people. It's just not mandatory. So like, but it's not going to hurt you. Like that's better than question types. All right. The 4th tip, which is our final do, is review all your mistakes so that you can learn from them. Doing problems without review cuts out half of the gains you can get. Yeah, that's good. You have to review. In fact, I would argue the review is not half of the gains, it is all of the gains. Just doing the question diagnoses you. That's what you don't understand. But that doesn't help you. The review is what helps you. So it's almost to the point where you don't get any value if you don't review. So good. We're 2-1-1 so far. So far it's a winning record. Although there is one bad tip. So like that's that. All right, we have 3 don'ts. Let's see what they give. Don't compare yourself to others. It typically does more harm than good. Yeah, I mean, yeah. I guess this comes down to personal affect because I actually find a lot of inspiration in comparison, which I know is that might, once again, might not be the healthiest. But I think when you look at other people, the way I do it is if they can pull it off, I definitely can. Like if I'm like, if they can do it, I can, which like maybe that's my own personal approach to life. And maybe that's like unhealthy, but I don't know. I'd say for some people, generally you probably shouldn't compare yourself to others. What I do like is the focus on yourself because you don't control others, you only control yourself. Um, so yeah, I guess that's a good tip. I'm just weird when it comes to that. Then don't use too many resources at once. Yeah, I agree with that because there's a lot of different LSAT prep. I think you should try to find one, like, I guess, source and then kind of go from there. I have various supplemental resources I will recommend. Like, if people want books, I have one LSAT book. It's not terribly comprehensive. I have recommendations I will give people. It's not most books. Like, if you come to me having read a certain book, I'm like, throw it out. Like, that's garbage. But if you're like, hey, like, I'm looking for more help, I will always point you in directions. I do think books are a little outdated. But the idea that they're like, if you do learn from multiple resources, it can become overwhelming where people have a lot of jargon. I hope that I'm less dogmatic when it comes to stuff like this, whereas we don't have jargon on the LSAT. Well, clarification, we do have jargon. I do say like paradox questions, which is not a thing on the LSAT. I just call them that. I say why X even though Y, or like detail questions on reading comp. And I guess none of this is real. So if you are working from a bunch of sources, you get more of that. I think mine are a little bit more intuitive where you understand what I'm talking about. But yeah, okay, good tip. I actually agree there. So 4, 1, and 1. Final tip. Don't sign up for an LSAT unless you are going to be ready. You only have a finite amount of attempts and you don't want to waste any of them. Yeah, we'll also say that's a good tip. Don't register before you're ready, unless the money means nothing to you, in which case, whatever. But it is $238 for the LSAT as of recording this. I'm sure by the time most of you are listening, that will have changed because LSAT tends to raise it once a year. So if you're taking it in the fall, I'd be ready to pay $250. Unfortunately, that is what they've done the past couple of years. So anyways, yeah, overall, I'd say decent advice. The whole question type thing, and I'm just like the one weirdo in the world of LSAT screaming about question types. And like I am the question type hater of the LSAT world, which part of which is, not, it's once again, it's not that they're not real. It's that it's not what makes you better at the test. And as such, I just find that people overly focus on them and it becomes this giant problem where it prevents them from ever truly getting better at the LSAT. Same thing with formal logic. Like does learning formal logic technically help? I guess maybe a little bit. Also, that's not what the test is testing. It's a reading test with very dense, difficult language, really weird sentence construction. And that is how you get better, not like, how do you do it contrapositive, which like, contrapositive, like, oh, thing C causes thing N. So if we don't have thing N, then we don't have thing C. Like that's technically what formal logic is. I don't know. Let's do it like a real world example of the contrapositive. So we say, if I drink milk, I will have strong bones. So we're saying that, milk causes big bones. And then the opposite of that, or the contrapositive, as LSAT prep calls it, is that if I do not have strong bones, I did not drink milk. Which is like, yeah, that's what that means. Like, that's another way of saying the same thing, basically, which is like, milk has this outcome. Therefore, if you don't have the outcome, you didn't have the condition. I think this is very sexy to teach people. And it often is like harder if you just like think through it that way. Whereas if you're just like conceptually asked, like, oh, you don't have strong bones, you must not have drank your milk. People get it conceptually, but people make it into this giant thing. And it's like all things that I'm railing against, not that it's not real, it's that it's the wrong emphasis. Okay, well, let's do like 1 or 2 more emails and then we'll get out of here. Well, and then do actual LSAT questions. Not for you podcast people, you guys don't get to do the questions, just the people here do. So another person reached out, and this is another person who is in class. Once again, I'll anonymize it as always, because it's not about the person, it's about the situation so that people can extrapolate that to their situation. And here they say, oh, hold on, where'd their email go? Beautiful. Hey, Ben, I'm feeling lost on the LSAT. I feel like I don't understand it at all. When you walk through the answers in class, I can follow along for the most part, but on my own, it's a different story. So often this has to do with the reading versus the ideas. If when I'm talking through it in class, it makes perfect sense. What that indicates is that you understand the ideas, which tends to be the case for most people. Like there are occasionally a few very difficult questions to clean up understanding on, but typically once it's broken down, like here is the very like explain like I'm 5 explanation of this LSAT question. People are like, yeah, that makes sense. I get that. Where it's tricky is getting it to that explain like I'm 5. So I'm guessing this person's having issues with the reading, but let's see a little bit more of their situation. I took a PT yesterday to get a starting score and got a 126, which is, for those of you that don't know the LSAT, that is getting basically every question wrong. But there is some more context here. In my defense, I didn't realize I didn't have to answer every question, so I rushed through everything. Yeah, so like they cranked through it, they did it at a very surface level, and because they did it at a surface level, that's not really the appropriate way to do it. I always recommend that you like solve the questions. Further, I don't know that this person put guesses down for the questions they didn't get to. So their score could be skewed. And for what's worth, like, is that a total meltdown? Like, yeah, it is, honestly. That's pretty bad. Also, is that cause for concern? Like, not necessarily, because if you can understand it, you're going to be fine. Like, you can all learn. A starting point is a starting point. And I've seen people go from like the 120s well into the 150s. And for what's worth, this might not even be a true 120, because like realistically, a true 120 is a very difficult uphill battle. You will get to at least the 150s with crazy work ethic. That being said, I'm guessing it's actually not that bad, because I'm guessing you didn't guess, and all those guesses would really crank up your score. They continue. I know I'm not dumb. My GPA is great, and I like to think I'm good at reading, which maybe you're good at reading. I do think the GPA is a good indicator, and this email is well written. Like, this is not someone, because for what's worth, based on the way someone emails you, you can kind of get an idea for how precise they are with the English language, which the way someone writes often I can pretty accurately guess what someone's LSAT score is based on the email they write. And to me, this feels like someone who can score easily in the 160s based on how this email is written. Could they have ChatGPT'd it? Very possibly. Is that likely? Like, probably not. I don't see why they would. So I think this writing is pretty indicative of like, you're not a dumb person. So they ask, do you think it would be worth taking another test, this time pacing myself properly to get a better sense of my real diagnostic score? Yeah, I would. And I already responded to this person. But basically, without the guesses, you might have been like a 145. You just didn't bubble in your guesses, which could completely change it. Because a 145 diagnostic is like, you're golden. Like, you're going to make awesome improvement. Once again, a 126 is rough, but I don't think that is truly where you're at. This final question is where this is most learnable, though, where they ask, do you think attempting the June LSAT would be a bad idea? Or is there a way to build up my skills in time? So yes and no. I think committing to the June LSAT is a bad idea, because I don't know how long this person will take to improve. Some people will get there in 4 months, others will not. But I think putting yourself on this arbitrary schedule it introduces pressure that is generally not useful. The only way that putting a test on the calendar is useful is if you're the type of person that only performs under pressure. Honestly, I worry about those people, because part of life is delayed gratification, and working on the LSAT is delayed gratification. So like, I worry that if you need it on the calendar to like do your work, that's kind of a problem. But what I would do is I'd put the registration deadline on the calendar, or maybe a few days in advance. So come the 6 weeks or whatever before the June LSAT and before you have to make that decision, just evaluate where are you at. If you're ready, take the test. If you're not, no shame, take August. So I think aiming for the June LSAT is awesome. I think attempting it regardless of what happens over these next few weeks is fairly mistaken. So I would just be careful. Like, overall, I believe in this person. I think you're going to do great on the LSAT, with the caveat that you just got to give yourself time. Some people take a lot of time. Some people don't take a lot of time. All you can do is try every day, and it'll go from there. Alrighty. And then what else do we have? Well, I do have a personal statement. I don't know that we have time for a personal statement. Let me check my inbox. Okay, so we'll end with a accommodations one. And someone emailed me and said, hey, man, I got the paperwork from my doctor to bump up my extra time to 100%. So this is someone who had 53 minutes, but they realized 70 minutes would be helpful. So they're asking for an amendment. I don't know how this is going to go, because I haven't had people do this, but I'm guessing it's going to work. So I'll ask this person to update. They continue, for peace of mind, not because I'm running out of time, and removal of the experimental section, because that is another accommodation. One accommodation you can get is more time. In fact, that is the standard one. But you can also get the accommodation section, or not accommodation, excuse me, the experimental section removed. So it goes from a 4-section test to a 3-section test, which makes the test much shorter, especially if you have a lot of time, because this is someone who's going to be taking 70 minutes per section. So 70 minutes by 4 is 280 minutes. With 10-minute breaks, we'll call that 320 minutes. That is almost 6 hours of prep or of test day. But if they get it down to 210 plus like 20 minutes of breaks, that's 230, which is about 4 hours. But 4 hours versus 6 hours is a big difference. So is that an advantage? Like, let's be real, kind of. A lot of people have this, I'd say, they don't want to call accommodations an advantage. They are. Like, it's easier to take it in this format. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. If you want to take it in an easier format, like, more power to you. That's what lawyers do. Lawyers take advantages. If you don't want to take advantages, like, because you want to be a hardo that does it the hard way, you can. I wouldn't want you as my lawyer. I want my lawyer who's going to do whatever it takes to win. I want winners. So anyways, total side tangent, but like, it's a broken system. And if that means you guys get ridiculous accommodations until LSAC cleans up how they're giving them out, that's fine. Don't tell Reddit I talked about this, because Reddit will get mad at me and say like, Ben's the problem, which, like, let's be real, I kind of am. But also, I'm informing of the problem. What the problem is, I didn't make it. It's their stupid system. They should fix it. Just because like they give accommodations to everyone, that's not my fault for telling people. It's their fault for doing it. Or at least that's my perspective on things. Anyways, they ask, is there any particular way that I should phrase the request for the removal of the experimental section when I'm uploading these new documents to LSAC? I don't know. I think as long as your doctor's diagnosis says give this person what they ask for, you're good to go. Because LSAC, not to do the whole like lesson on this, but the basic reason they give accommodations is because they don't want to get sued. And when there's a doctor or a professional that is signed off saying so-and-so needs extra time or needs whatever they ask for, if LSAC denies that, they could get sued and then have to pay a settlement. In fact, there was a case back in, I want to say the mid 2010s, so like 2015, 2016, 2017. I don't know the exact date, but it was a lawsuit, not of the DOJ, but of some similar organization. And they sued LSAC because LSAC was denying all these accommodations requests. And LSAC had to pay about an $8 million settlement, which is not crazy money. I mean, well, it is a lot of money, don't get me wrong. It's not that much money for LSAC. LSAC has an annual revenue of about $100 million. So, and this is public information. This isn't like inside baseball. You can just Google LSAC. Nonprofits have to disclose their books. LSAC is a nonprofit. Ipso facto, if you want to see how much, like what they do with their money, you can see. Anyways, the point is that LSAC is very scared of having to pay another settlement. And as such, they just prove everyone. So on that note, we'll end things. Hopefully this was helpful. If you have podcast stuff, we'll do one once a week. So send stuff in. And yeah, let's do some LSAT questions for those of us that are here. If you enjoyed what we talked about today or learned something new, please leave a review or a rating. It really does help us out and helps us reach more people. If you have a question or anything you want talked about in the world of LSAT or law school admissions, you can always email support@heyfuturelawyer.com to get it in the podcast agenda. Just put podcast in the subject and we will talk about it on the show. Alrighty, that's all we have for today. So I will see you all next time.